Welcome. Let's prove the quadratic formula. Okay, now I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you all the steps, but I'm kind of going to give us a guide first by solving the equation on the right by completing the square. So I need to think, what number would I add to both sides of this equation to make it a perfect square trinomial? Or to make the thing on the left a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to say 3, oh wait, pardon me, I need to factor out that 3 first, times x squared minus 2x, and I think about what I would add to both sides to make the thing inside parentheses a perfect square. So I take that negative 2 and I divide it in half, and then I square it, and that's equal to positive 1. So I'm going to add that positive 1 in there. And I like to usually use a yellow highlighter to indicate, that's the complete the square step. But I need to be fair to both sides, and I need to think, what did I actually add if I was to distribute this out? What I really added to the left side is a positive 3, because it's 3 times the 1. Okay, so I need to add 3 over here. Okay, and so then I'm going to kind of factor the thing in the parentheses, so that's x minus 1 squared. That's going to equal 4, and I would divide both sides by 3. I would get 4/3. Okay, I could take the square root of both sides of this equation, and I would get x minus 1 equals, don't forget the plus or minus, the square root of 4/3. Okay, and then I would add 1 to both sides, and get 1 plus or minus the square root of 4/3. Okay, so that's kind of like the process that I'm going to take on ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 to get my quadratic formula. Okay, so let's start. All right, we're going to start by clearing out that number, that c, okay, to make it look like the guide that we've got. So I think I might, how are we doing on space? Not great, but I'll just make it work. So, all right, I'm going to say, and I factored out the a first, so plus, okay, and when I factor something out, I'm really kind of like dividing. And then I'm going to say that's equal to negative c. And then I'm going to figure out what number am I going to add to both sides to make sure I've got a perfect square on the inside of that parentheses. Okay, so I take positive b over a, and I divide it by 2, and then I square it. Okay, so that'll be b squared over 4a squared. Right, and if you need to pause for a second and think about why that's true, you should go ahead and do that. But this is a video about proving the quadratic formula, so I'm not going to really stop through every algebraic detail. All right, so I'm going to add that to both sides. So plus b squared over 4a squared, and if if I distributed over that a, what I'd really have is ab squared over 4a squared, so that's b squared over 4a. So I'm going to say plus b squared over 4 times a, because really one of those powers of a will cancel with the 2 powers in the denominator. That's another way of thinking about it. Okay, and then, okay, pretty much what did I do off, going to my guide? Okay, I factored. Okay, but I think I might go ahead and put the expression on the right here with a common denominator. Okay, so if I wanted a denominator of 4a, I could say that's negative c times 4a divided by 4a plus b squared over 4a. And because I know where I'm headed with this, I might just go ahead and write it, with a familiar way. B squared minus 4ac divided by 4a. All right, and then I've still got a, but I'm going to factor that thing. So what it's going to end up being on the inside of this factor is it's this number, it's x plus that number. So x plus b over 2a. And this might seem a little off to you. It's like, oh man, I've got b squared minus 4ac, but it's over 4a. And I've got plus b over 2a. Like, what's going on here? Okay, but it will become more clear here in a second. Okay, I'm going to divide both sides by a. And I'll have this squared thing equaling, okay, if I multiply both sides by 1 over a, I'll just incur another power of a down here in the denominator. So I'll have b squared minus 4ac all divided by 4a squared. Okay, and then I'm going to take the square root of both sides of the equation, and I'll get x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus, okay, I'll square root the other side. And one thing we probably haven't talked about in this class yet is that the square root of a quotient is the square root of the top divided by the square root of the bottom. So I can take the square root of b squared minus 4ac and just kind of divide that by the square root of 4a squared. But wait a second, the square root of 4a squared is the square root of 4 times the square root of a squared, so it'll just be 2a. Right, and now I'm in business, right? I'm pretty much ready to go. I can solve for solve for x by subtracting b over 2a, and that's where I'll get x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And we know how, fraction addition and fraction subtraction works. If we have a common denominator, we just add the numerators and keep the denominator the same. Okay, so that's where we get the formula x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Thanks for watching.